Is your narcissist changing? Maybe you've been apart for a period of time. Maybe they've come back in your life and they're like, wow, I'm so much better. I've worked through this. I figured this out. I've changed all these things. And you're like, wait a second. Are they actually changing? I'm not sure. Is your narcissist changing? Is that a question that you're wondering or a question that you're struggling with? If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness, growth, healing, and change. We do it on all the different platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. Check us out sometime. You never know when we're going to go live on some of those platforms. Also, we do have the podcast. So on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, you can look us up under Raw Motivations. If you haven't had a chance to be able to check out the NARC app, go to narcapp.com. NARCAPP stands for Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Community. Community of like-minded people to help you heal, grow, and change. We have people logging in and helping other people on a daily basis to give advice, to give support, to give encouragement as they're going through the crazy making of being with the narcissist and then getting away from it. A lot of times when people get away from it, they still have in their mindset, like, wait a second, like, I don't know what to do. I feel like I still want to go back. I still want to interact. I still want to love that person because I'm so in love with them. And oftentimes they're stuck in a trauma bond. And I try to help people to be able to break through the trauma bond, get through the detox phase of getting away from a narcissist and setting up healthy boundaries moving forward in their lives. So I'd love to interact with you. You can go to rawmotivations.com, be able to reach out there for information, for clarity as you're getting away from that narcissistic person. The other thing I'd like to encourage you to look into is the journal that we have out called From Fantasy to Reality. It's on Amazon.com. It's in the links in the bio. Got over 100 prompts inside the journal to be able to help you start to think through the relationship that you were in and to see, are you actually believing a fantasy or a reality getting away from that person? Well, today, the hard thing is like understanding, are you believing a reality that your narcissist is changing, or is it just a fantasy? Is it just a giant future fake making you think, making you hope that it actually is going to change when in reality, maybe there's no change there? Now you could be saying today, but I see change in this person. They've gone from being abusive and mean to now they're actually being loving and nice. Like they're interacting in a positive way. Maybe you're saying they've been in therapy for like 10 years now. So I think they're actually getting better. Maybe they finally got to the place where they're not cheating. So like I think they're faithful now, so I don't have to worry about that. And a lot of times people start wondering, like, what is actually happening? Because I'm starting to see different changes. Maybe you've been separated for a period of time and you come back together and you're like, wow, like they seem really different. And it's like the first couple weeks in, you're like, this seems really good. I think they're actually changing. Well, you have to understand a lot of times narcissists will change, but not for the right reasons. Sometimes they'll change to be able to keep the relationship. Sometimes they'll change to be able to keep their image. Sometimes they'll change because there's no other option based on the circumstances and what they're faced with. They need to change and morph and develop something so they don't look as bad as what they're being made out to be. Oftentimes, narcissists will change as a way to manipulate and to control a situation. They'll do that to say, oh, I did change this. Oh, this did happen. I did listen to you. So why are you upset now that I'm still abusing you? You see, sometimes narcissists will change their behaviors. They'll stop drinking. They'll finally get sober. They'll stop cheating. They'll stop yelling. They'll stop screaming at you in front of the kids. They'll stop cussing at you. And maybe it gets even harder sometimes when it feels like, wait a second, their tone adjusts a little bit. Like they don't have that harsh tone with me anymore. Like maybe they're actually in therapy. Maybe, now they're being more transparent because they're sharing their location. They're doing all these different things. But something still doesn't fit right. Something still doesn't feel right of knowing what's actually going on. Sometimes that tone from turning aggressive turns to passive aggressive. Still feels the same at times, but it sounds different. What is actually there? What's actually real? A lot of times people struggle with 3 different things. First thing is oftentimes people ignore patterns. We see patterns all the time, every single place in the entire planet. But when it comes to relationships, a lot of times we ignore the patterns that we've habitually seen time and time and time again. We've seen a consistency in yelling, in cheating, in abuse, in throwing stuff. We've seen these patterns, and then we're like, well, it's actually a little bit different now. Because this hasn't happened or this hasn't happened, but the same pattern is actually underneath the surface. Sometimes they hide patterns really well. For me personally, I hid a lot of patterns. My wife had an idea and a thought and a gut instinct that there was something wrong, that I was having affairs, that I was cheating on her, but she didn't know the exact pattern because I didn't confess it until the very last moment. I didn't confess the affairs till it was like 4 confessions all at once. It wasn't like it was one at a time because she didn't see that pattern. It was a pattern that I tried to keep hidden. But she also saw some of the cycles. She saw this cycle that I'd been in, but she'd already seen cycles of in that relationship before she even knew there was cheating or affairs. She also had already seen cycles that were there. The verbal cycle of abuse that kept happening over and over and over again. We'd fix it and then move on, and then fix it and then move on, and then sweep it under the rug and then move on. Like all these different types of things. She saw that, but it didn't stop her from leaving at that point. She was still there. But then being able to see more and more patterns and more intentionality of like, wait a second, she started to see when the cycles didn't stop, that's when she had to leave. That's when she started to get her power back, as she'd stopped ignoring the patterns that were there. And she was like, wait a second, these are cycles. These continue to happen. They're not changing. So therefore, I'm leaving. And my wife left. My wife left for a period of time where she was able to get away, fully disengage, work on herself, be in therapy, break the trauma bond to be able to get free from the toxicity that was pouring out on her because she stopped ignoring the patterns. The problem is a lot of times people bring love into it and they're like, oh my gosh, but maybe I can fix them. Maybe I love them enough. Like they'll change, and they ignore the patterns that are in front of their face. And as a result, you stay in a relationship a lot longer because you chose to ignore patterns that were there. If you're seeing a pattern, don't ignore it. Second thing, people ignore patterns. Second thing is people excuse lies. They're getting better, but... And there's not really like a, okay, but what's actually going on? Well, like they were telling the truth to me, and I really do appreciate that, but they actually told something different to like my brother and my sister. Well, they actually were saying this, but then I heard them kind of say something different on this side. And I had to stop someone one time. I was like, okay, like that's not them slipping up. That's called lying. Like they said one thing and then they said the opposite thing. Like that's not telling the truth. That is lying. Let's call it for what it is. And then let's start moving forward from there. Okay? Because a lot of times you'll have narcissists that come back in, but they're still lying. They're still justifying. They're still excusing their behaviors and their actions. Well, I'm sorry, but you made me do it. I'm sorry because blah, blah, blah. Okay? And a lot of times those lies start to hide the actions that are following. And you're like, wait a second, you told me you stopped drinking, but like when I went out to the trash can, I found, beers out there. What's actually going on? Well, that was from a buddy of mine. Oh, okay. So it's from a buddy of yours the past 50 times I found it. A lot of times people ignore the patterns and they excuse the lies that are happening. Maybe it's even the aspect, like I mentioned before, of not yelling anymore, but now it's more passive aggressive, those small digs. And the thing is, when people are excusing the lying and they're ignoring the patterns, they're putting hope over change. They're wanting that hope so bad, they're willing to sacrifice the logic and the things that they're seeing because they're hoping at that possibility. And that's the third thing, is that people are addicted to a maybe versus reality. And they did a test, and it's in the book, The Covert Passive Aggressive Narcissist. It actually talks about a test that they did with monkeys, where they'd have these monkeys in the room, they'd turn on a light, the monkeys would go, pull a lever, they'd get a treat. Happen over and over and over again, okay, like Pavlov's theory, right? Well, the thing that they noticed is then they started changing it up. They turn the light, pull the lever, not get a treat. Randomly get a treat, all over the place. And the monkeys started to have an effect and a response to what was happening, and their anticipation levels rose to such a high degree that it was akin to the idea of being addicted to cocaine. And the point that the book was trying to make through that illustration that was actually there to try to understand and bring into fruition of like, hey, this is how people respond a lot of times, is people oftentimes are addicted to a maybe versus a reality. We see this all the time with different addictions, with different gambling, with playing the lottery, with different things that people are like, I might be able to do this. Well, if you did something that was a surety, a reality of like, if I do this, it will produce this result. But you're like, no, I don't want that. I want this. I want to gamble it away. I want to try this. I want to focus on this. And a lot of times people get addicted to the maybe, the possibility, the hope, the potential, the maybe, the possibility that this person might change feels better than the reality that they're not. Is your narcissist changing? Do you see honesty? We're talking 100% transparency. Past, present, future. 100% transparency, honesty. The ego has to die. That means they have to release control of what's actually going on in their lives. That means they have to say, like, here, take my phone. I'm going to switch to a dumb phone. Like have access to everything. Here's all my email. Here's all my passwords. Here's all my location. Like they have to give up everything. They have to lose control. Okay? Vulnerability. Not the past. Past vulnerability typically is fake vulnerability when we're talking about toxic persons. Vulnerability of right now. What are the current emotions you're experiencing? I'm fine. It's good. No big deal. Move on. It's not vulnerable. Honesty, vulnerability, and consistent change. How are they showing up each day, changing and growing? You know what that means? It needs to be trackable, it needs to be quantifiable, and you need to be able to look at a chart and say, hey, this person is improving. You're like, why would you get that minute with it? Because otherwise, you'll fake yourself into staying with someone that has no change demonstrated long term, but you'll be like, but he's changing because he went to therapy. When in reality, you're not looking at the truth of the situation. So you need to be careful that you don't ignore patterns, that you don't ignore or excuse the lying, that you're not addicted to the maybe or the possibility of something instead of the reality that person's not changing. If you're not saying honesty, vulnerability, or consistent change, you need to leave.